Gemma hadn't noticed. It wasn't until Milo hiccuped at the question, as he sometimes does when he's surprised, that she realized he was holding something behind his back. He shot her a sheepish stare, which is hard for a lemur to do. Slowly, he pulled out the thin scroll from behind his back. "Where did you get that, Milo?" Gemma asked with surprise, but no hiccups. "I believe it was from that little toy he was playing with over there," interrupted Chuck, pointing to the tiny ship on the deck of the Mystic Reed. Milo offered it up to Gemma. She grabbed it and shot him a stare. There was no room for secrets on a boat. That's something that Uncle Horace had taught her. The Mystic Reed was her boat, and she didn't like the idea of a stranger knowing more about its goings-on than her. "I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, Captain Bucket," she said, turning back to him. "I don't know what makes you think it's a riddle." Gemma unrolled the scroll and scanned the parchment. She paused, then looked up again. "Okay, fine, it's a riddle." More curious than the hidden riddle was the way in which it was written. The beautiful black ink calligraphy had a quality that she had seen only twice while sailing the 8 seas. The first time was in a ledger stolen off a royal ship that she had won in a game of checkers. Milo lost it in a different game of checkers the same night. The second was on a spyglass telescope that Gemma's uncle had shown her. "A gift from old friends," he had said. This writing was just as intricate and written with even more care. "How did you know what was on here?" asked Gemma. Chuck Bucket gave his biggest kindness smile. "I know a riddle when I see one. I deal with them quite a bit in my travels." Gemma pondered this for a moment. She had known some treasure hunters that traded riddles late into the night on a long journey. They did it for entertainment, but also to test their wits. A few of the riddles were ancient and well-known. The kind of riddles that some children could answer proudly. But sometimes a sailor would come from a distant land with a riddle that was yet untold. Gemma liked the idea that the world still held secret riddles waiting to be solved, and suspected that Captain Chuck Bucket had uncovered a great many in his work. "So, let's have it," he added. He leaned in close and stuck his ear out towards her. Gemma read the scroll aloud. "In a small pond, I was a small fish. Now is the time to grant me my wish." She read it aloud a second time to be sure. Gemma and Milo looked at each other with blank stares. "I don't get it, Milo," said Gemma. "Was there a fish in the ship?" Milo crossed his arms and shook his head. He was not a fish thief. Captain Chuck Bucket sighed and stood up straight again. "I had hoped it might be more difficult. I do enjoy a difficult riddle." "You mean you know what the answer?" Gemma asked with surprise. "Indeed I do," he replied. There was a great pause. "So, will you tell us?" spitted out Gemma. Captain Bucket stroked his chin and thought for a moment. "I might," he said. "I might." Milo lifted his finger in the air excitedly, then hopped down to rummage below deck. He came scurrying back up on 2 legs holding a checkers board. "No, Milo," urged Gemma. "You are not playing him in checkers for it. You'll end up losing the boat." Milo pouted and turned back around. "He's never won," whispered Gemma to Captain Bucket. "And I don't mean that as an exaggeration. I mean not a single time. And he played a chicken twice." "Bad luck, I'm sure," said Captain Bucket sweetly. Then his eyes lit up, as if an idea had just struck him. "Why don't we trade instead? You give me that elegant purple ribbon in your hair, and I'll give you the answer. It will add nicely to my collection," he said. Gemma touched the ribbon in her hair. "My ribbon?" she questioned, undoing the knot and holding it in her hands. "I suppose. I just got it back, though." "Then you won't miss it much." Captain Bucket reached out and grabbed it from her hands, then secured it in his own wavy hair. He retreated to the steering wheel of the dusty rust basket and waved Gemma farewell. "Goodbye, Gemma. A chance encounter I won't soon forget," he said, pulling away. Milo arrived back and sat on the railing, looking out. "Wait!" shouted Gemma. "What's the answer to the riddle?" Captain Bucket gave one last smile and cupped his hands to his mouth. "Sometimes what we just need room to explore. That ship you found is looking for a bigger pond." And with that, he spun the dusty rust basket towards the horizon and sailed away. Gemma stood watching for a moment longer. "We make deals with some interesting people, Milo," she said to a nod. Milo picked up the tiny ship and handed it to Gemma. It was hardly the straightforward answer that Gemma had wanted, but it was still a step in the right direction. The tiny ship needed more room. It needs a bigger pond. The pair peered over the edge of the boat into the water and watched low waves slap the hull. "It doesn't get much bigger than that," she said. It was the best and only idea that she had. Gemma took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and dropped the tiny ship over the edge of the mystic reed. "I sure hope it floats," she added. The ship plopped down below the surface, sending out ripples, then bobbed back up. A small cylinder in the back of the boat, that Milo had assumed was a miniature barrel, became electrified by the saltwater ocean. It whirred and whizzed until a propeller protruded out of the end. It turned slowly at first, and then built up steam until it was spinning so fast that the blades couldn't be seen. With a gentle hum, the tiny ship sped off in a direction only it knew. "Milo, that ship is getting away." Gemma jumped back to the steering wheel. Using all of her might, she grabbed a peg on the wheel and pulled hard to spin the boat around. Milo wrapped his tail and hands around another one and pulled alongside her. "That's it," she shouted. The boat had turned almost all the way around by the time they were on course to follow. Milo climbed up the mast and used their spyglass telescope to spot the tiny ship. Whenever Gemma veered too far in one direction, Milo would squeak and point to the starboard or port. The mystic reed had a great size advantage over the tiny ship that it was tailing. However, a sailboat is at whim of the wind and must, at times, take a more indirect route to get where it's going. So, it was with both luck and skill that Gemma and her first mate, or first primate as she liked to joke, caught up to the ship in time to see it find the lightning current. Gemma had heard tales of a current of electric blue, so powerful and full of life that it lit up the surface of the sea, but she had never seen it. She didn't truly believe anyone else had either. But as they approached the tiny ship, there was no denying that it was riding down the center of a glowing blue stream, the very shape and color of lightning. The tiny ship zigged and zagged with the turns, and Gemma did her best to stay the course. She no longer needed Milo's navigation, since the sea itself was showing her the way. The lighting pattern got slimmer and slimmer as the two vessels approached a sandy shore. The tiny ship stopped dead just before the break of the waves on the shore. Gemma dropped anchor and watched from above as it let out a few bubbles and flipped over. The hull opened up just before the ship sank out of sight. In its place, it left a message in a bottle floating on the water, waiting to be opened.